As a child or a teen, what did you imagine your future home would be like?
I didn't know. I remember thinking when I was in fourth, fifth, sixth grade, somewhere in there, I always had thoughts of what my life would be like when I was older. I thought, am I going to be married? Am I going to have kids? And I knew I always wanted two boys and a girl. I wanted a boy and a boy and a girl, and I wanted them all to be pretty close in age, just like my brother and I were, pretty close in age. We're 14 months apart, and my kids now are about 2 years apart each. All of them, actually, surprisingly. We got the blended family thing going on. So my stepkids, two oldest, it's all like 2 years apart from, 15 all the way down to 7, which is pretty cool.
When you would finally sell on your home, what was that like?
It was a process for sure. It was a process. And at that point, I had started going to church. So what happened to get me to move out was that we were living in Edgewood, and my grandma, who was paying the bills, had been, for lack of better terms, taken and placed into a assisted living community. And so all the bills fell on me. I was working at Safeway at the time, and I had to pay for the rent. I think the rent was only $800 a month, which is kind of crazy, but it was like the rent was $800 a month, maybe 900. I can't remember exactly. I think it was eight. And my dad was still living there, and my dad was this, again, when I say alcoholic, if you haven't been in an alcoholic household before, then it's hard to understand, but it's like 4, 5, sometimes 6 nights a week of just chaos, right? Like he's just drinking and yelling and screaming, and things are sort of dirty, and just it was not great. But I sort of resigned myself to think, I mean, I guess it's it. I was like super self-conscious about living there. And I had ladies that I'd bring over and stuff, but there were certain people that I would, like women I'd talk to, that I would never bring into that house, right? I would just wouldn't, because it was embarrassing. It was super, super embarrassing.
You don't always get to choose in this life, win and lose in this life, but I'm approved.
Moving out, what that looked like was I ended up going to church and giving my life to God. And during that process, at some point after that all happened, I was still in church, and I met this wonderful woman who's actually has passed now, but we started dating. And when we were dating, we started talking about future and different things along the lines of a future. And she and I had gotten an argument about my dad living with us, because she was like, there's no way that your dad's gonna live with us. I'm like, well, what is he supposed to do, right? And I had taken on this responsibility of like, he had, like, this is it. Like, I was about to draw a line in the sand, right? And praise God, like, her dad, who was a pastor, had sat down with me. And I don't remember why we met up, if this was a specific reason, but we had met up. And the conversation came up, and he said, Andre, you're not responsible for your dad. It's not your job to take care of him. It's not your job to pay his bills. It's not your job to house him. He's an adult, and the only way he's going to learn is if he does those things himself. And he's been taken care of for so long that now he just believes that that's what's supposed to happen. And it was like this mind altering, perception altering thing that I had never ever considered before, which sounds funny, right? People probably from the outside like, just leave, dude, just leave. But for me, it just wasn't an option for whatever reason. And so he said that, and I thought, I'm going to leave. I'm going to get out. And so I went home, and I told my dad. It was my home, obviously, but it wasn't like my home, because I was paying for him to just lay around and do nothing for the most part. And my dad wasn't all bad, so I don't want to make it seem like that, but there was a lot of it that was. But he's laying there on the couch, and I said, Dad, I'm going to move out in 9 months. And I'm just giving you a heads up that this is happening. I'm moving out in 9 months. 8 months came around. Dad, it's 8 months, and he's not doing anything, right? He's not trying to prep. He doesn't have a job. He hasn't had a job for like 10 years, right? 10, maybe 15 years at this point. Dad, I'm moving out in 7 months. Dad, I'm moving out in 6 months. And every time I tell him, it's this big argument. And then that, when he's drinking, he's yelling at me, you don't care about me. You hate me. You're just going to let poor old dad be here by himself and he's going to be homeless. And I was like, yeah, like you are going to be homeless. Like you better figure something out. So get down to the last minute. And I say, Dad, today's the day, I'm out. So I end up meeting this deaf gentleman who has a room for rent. And so I end up renting, saying that I'm going to rent his room. And so that was in Tacoma off of 40th and Spokane, which is the hood, by the way. So if you've never lived in Tacoma, 38th and McKinley, it is what it is, right? I mean, they're dressing Tacoma up, but that, 40th and McKinley or 40th and Spokane is just right off of McKinley there. And it was like, there was one time I woke up and they had a raid, a SWAT raid on the house right across the street. Like they were out there throwing flashbangs in, yelling Tacoma police. It's like 5, 6 in the morning, and we had a bullet hole in the front window. And so I had moved out, and I want to give a shout out to, a really, really good friend of mine. His name's Gabe. Gabe, if you ever watch this, I just appreciate you, because I was like, hey, Gabe, can I get some help moving? Gabe shows up. I hadn't even packed anything. I didn't have no planning or packing. I was just going to fill up a couple boxes and be out, right? And I didn't have a bunch of stuff. And so Gabe shows up, and man, bless his heart, because he didn't say anything at all. He was just like, okay. Like he was the coolest. I mean, he is the coolest guy, right? Like he'll show up for you anytime. And he just came in there, packed up these boxes with me. And I probably had like maybe 6 boxes. He had his truck. And we just loaded up these boxes, and then I just rolled on out to Tacoma with like 4 or 5 boxes and a mattress, right? And so I ended up living in this house, which turned out to be kind of a hoarder house, So I only lived there for about 1.5 years, and it got kind of strange, so I ended up moving. But yeah, that was my move out story. It was a big deal for me to move out on my own, and so I had never even conceptualized that to even the smallest degree of living without my dad before my 20th birthday, which is wild.
When have you ever lived in a home without no roof?
The only time that I did that was right after my divorce. Right after my divorce, I moved to downtown Sumner, and I lived there for close to 1 year by myself, a little bit less than 1 year by myself, but that was the only time. I pretty much had roommates, or, was living in, renting a room from somebody, or, something along those lines, or got married and shared an apartment, whatever it was. But yeah, I've pretty much had a person live with me, except for that brief time in Sumner.
What made you choose that house?
It was a friend of mine's home. He was renting out, and so yeah, he rented it out to me, and it was a good area. It seemed to be the right place, right? It seemed pretty close to where I was going. It wasn't super expensive, or when I say where I was going, it was pretty close to my kids, and they were in Puyallup, downtown Puyallup at that point, but it was far enough away. Not that I wouldn't have lived in Puyallup, I definitely would have, but it was just I don't know, it just kind of happened to come up. I thought it was a good fit. It was small, it wasn't expensive, it had everything I needed, had enough space for the kids, at least for that time being. I was having a house built by Richmond American in downtown Sumner at that point, and so I just needed a place to kind of hang my hat for a little bit. It didn't need to be crazy until my house was finished, and I was able to move in there.
How did it feel being in home alone?
It was a mixed bag. It was a mixed bag for sure. It was new. I appreciated the time alone for sure. There was a lot of time I was able to work on myself. There was a lot of crying going through that divorce. If you've ever been through something like that before, it's pretty rough. So I was able to really spend some time by myself working through a lot of those emotions, and I feel like it was good. I feel like it cleared my mind, cleared my whatever. Like, it's almost like kind of like let me leave everything else that I had, all the junk and stuff that I was working through, just kind of like leave that there. Now I'm this new life person ish, so I'm moving on to the next thing. So um, yeah, so overall it felt good. I was able to keep a pretty clean house, and I took care of the yard, and I had some responsibility. Even though it was a rental house, I still wanted to take care of it. And yeah, I enjoyed being there by myself. It was good.
Look back, but tell us about
The first time we purchased a home, that was with my ex-wife, and we were living in downtown Puyallup at the time. We had moved from Mount Lake Terrace to downtown Puyallup. We were in downtown Puyallup, I want to say, for about 2 years, renting a house from some friends of ours. It was a nice house, actually a house that they used me as a real estate agent to sell. Thank you guys, appreciate that. And we were actually, it was 2018. We tried to buy one time before, Mac's wife and I, and it just didn't work out for a couple different reasons. But from that point in 2018, we were just having our last child, Erica, my daughter. And Erica was actually shipped to Tacoma General NICU because she had some issues, right? And she had to go through surgery the first day she was born. It was like a huge thing. And I was in real estate since 2016, July 16, so it was like a year and a half in, and doing pretty well overall. And it was kind of a whirlwind. But my style is you just make decisions based on where you're at, and you have an idea of where you want to go. And part of it is, I like being a provider. I like to be able to provide for my family. In this case, my wife, she always wanted to have a home. And so I had sold there was a house listed next to the one that we ended up buying, but I'd sold that to some people that I had known. And we sold that house, and I was heading back out from Puyallup to the NICU to see Erica, but I needed to swing by this house and do a final walkthrough, where make sure everything's in line before the house closes. And my ex-wife happened to be with me, and the house next door had come on the market. It was on the market for a couple days, and she's like, "Is this house for sale?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think it is." So I pull it up, and it's for sale, and they want 400 and whatever, $60,000 for something crazy for it, right? At that time, it was like 460. It was 2,750 square foot house on a 10,000 square foot lot. And at that point, like 450 was crazy to me in 2018. I was like, that's like luxury prices, but things were still selling for a pretty good price. And the one next to us, we had just sold for 460. And so we put an offer together on this other one, and they ended up accepting it. And so we bought this house in the middle of probably one of the craziest seasons that I've ever been a part of, with my daughter in the hospital and two young kids at home. Bennett and Becker are 2 and 4 at that point. And it's just this wild ride that we're going on. So we buy this house and end up moving in within, 45 days or so. So yeah, that was my first experience buying a house in downtown Puyallup.
Tell me about where you live now, and how did you end up here?
I am currently in Bonnie Lake, and true to form, I'm here because of my current wife. So I ended up going through divorce. My first wife, my ex-wife, obviously I've been using that term, so there's at least one other marriage that I've had. So I go through this divorce, and we end up selling that house in Puyallup. And during that divorce time, before that house was sold, in Sumner is where I was living. And I happened to find these brand new built, this new development downtown Sumner. Richmond Americans putting this brand new development together. And I just drive in, I want to see what the houses look like and just what they have to offer. And they were selling them at $485,000. And I thought, that's a pretty good deal, for that time. This is 2019, 2020. I thought, that's a really good deal. So I'm just gonna put an offer in on these. Hopefully my divorce is finished by the time the house is going to be finished, because it's a 9-month-ish process, plus COVID was happening at that point. So things were taking a lot longer. Put an offer in on that house, get the lot that I want, lot 22, and then we're waiting for it to get built. Well, during that time, I happened to download an app on my phone. I'm not going to tell you which app it was. It was Tinder. And I was swiping all which way, but I did end up meeting this wonderful woman on Tinder, of all places. And we meet downtown Sumner one Sunday morning, and we walk the track. And, I just thought, okay, and I'm just fresh out of this sort of divorce thing, right? Or I'm kind of in the middle of it. And I'm just like, I don't really know. And so we're kind of, going back and forth. But long story short, we, end up staying together. She's got these 2 great kids. I got 3 kids. They meshed really well. And we end up getting married. And so after we get married, we briefly live, not before, sorry, we weren't married yet. We got engaged. We briefly live in her place in Lake Tapps, which is literally in Allen York Park. It's like across the street from Allen York Park. And then from Lake Tapps, we moved down to Sumner when my house was finished being built. So that house got finished. We all moved in there for about 6 months. And then I found a house in Graham and I was like, man, we got to buy this house. So we would go out there together. I show her this home. I'm like, let's buy this house. And she's like, great, let's do it. So we buy this house, live there for 2 years, realize this 40-minute drive to get these kids to school and sports, it ain't it. So we ended up getting that house ready for market, sold that house at a great price too, by the way, and moved back to Sumner into an 1,800 square foot home with 5 kids and thought, it's tight. We could probably do it. But we ended up, we were just kind of peeking around looking, and we found this really great deal on this house in the Lake Tapps, Bonnie Lake area. And it was just not marketed great, right? It just wasn't some great marketing. It had been on the market twice. It was, sitting on the market for 90 something days. And I just thought, let's just go take a look at it, right? It wasn't really anything that I had any promise in, but I took my wonderful wife, Cindie, and we went and looked at the house. She loved it, right? To me, like a house is a house is a house, right? Like I could probably just live, I don't know if I'm touching my mic here, but I could probably just live wherever, right? And most likely be okay with it. But I want to be a provider. I want my wife and my kids and my family to like where they live. And she has a great vision for, the family. And so I like to pour into that vision because I don't always have my own visions on what I want to do or where I want to go. And I've kind of always been like that. I'm comfortable with it for the most part now. And so I can see her vision and I can really pour into that. And so that's how we ended up here, the Lake Tapps, Bonnie Lake area. She loves it. I love it. It's, great schools, close to everything. There's every store that you could need or want is here. It's just a jaunt down the hill to get into Sumner if you wanted to. Sumner High School is a great school that we have good ties with, and yeah, it's a really, really good area.
What does this home represent for this stage in your life?
It's the biggest home I've ever lived in, so it represents some accomplishment to have been able to purchase a home of this size. And it's not just a large size, but it gives every kid in our family their own room. And that's a big deal because I've never had that. And they get to have their own room and they really like doing that. And it's peaceful to be here. My wife loves being here, and that makes it even better for me. And yeah, I think that's probably what it represents. Buy a house right now as soon as you can. Buy a home. Yeah, if I could go back, I would have told him. I would have said, listen, my friend, who's also me, buy a house. Like it was 2000. I could have bought a house in 2009, 10, 11, any of those times. Because I was working at Safeway at that point for 5, 6 years. So I had plenty of track record, had a good income, enough to purchase a home. And I would have told myself, buy this house, sit on it for a little bit, and as soon as you can buy another one, rent this one out and buy another one, rent this one. And I would have just done that. Yeah. And if I would have you just buy the house and, move into something where you take a little bit of responsibility. I get it if you're not going to stay in the area and you're kind of like, I don't really know. But I've seen so much indecision cost people so much money and the ability to purchase. It's wild.